Okay. So I want to start off by sharing with you some stuff that's in the news in the last 2 months. So this is just me checking out the news for anything related to sensors and how they're being used in all the different industries. I found really interesting articles, and I think you'll find these the same as well. I think these are great articles that you might decide to share with your students as well. So this particular article, it's protecting the rainforest with modern sensors technology. So they were using sensors, including sound sensors, that will detect loud noises. And those noises might be something like chainsaws. And so by detecting that, we can then alert local rangers about the location of where these chainsaws are, and we can reprimand these individuals. Also, these sensors, they have like a sensor package that they're using. They're able to monitor the presence of primates, birds, frogs, insects, and bats as well. In the future, they're going to be linking the sound recordings with other information, including temperature, humidity, ozone, and also they just started detecting CO2 as well. So it's really helping them to have a greater understanding of the biodiversity, as well as ways to protect the rainforest. A second article that I found really interesting is this one here, which is a picture of a bridge in Kingston. So Kingston, Ontario. Some graduate students and faculty at Queen's University have placed sensors just beneath the bridge. It's a Waban crossing bridge. I meant to check out the pronunciation of that, and that's in Kingston once again. So the sensors collect data that they can then examine how the bridge's expansion joints and bearings perform as the concrete expands and contracts with changes in seasons and temperature. So you're probably aware of some of bridge disasters that have happened around the world. Now we have smart bridges, and these are pretty close to us, and this is something that's being used. These sensors are being used by grad students and faculty at Queen's University. Ingestible sensors. So engineers at MIT have used these little ingestible sensors, and they use magnetic fields. So they detect magnetic fields to track the location of these sensors within the GI tract. And this reveals where it might have slowed down along the digestive tract so that they can figure out where the slowdowns are occurring. They can pinpoint where that is, and then it can help the doctors more easily diagnose gastrointestinal motility issues. A couple more here. So these students are actually only second and third year students at University of Toronto, and they participated in a global sports analytics competition. It's called the NFL's Big Data Bowl. It's one of the biggest ones in the world, biggest competitions in the world related to big data in sports. So what they did is they're using the motion tracking sensors, so similar to like what we'll be doing a little bit later today with the accelerometer. So they're using the motion tracking sensors that are embedded inside of the football players' uniforms to create animated heat maps. And this is a quantitative way to help coaches and the players make decisions, because they can compare plays. They can determine which offensive lines, for example, are best at protecting their quarterback. So there's all kinds of different things that they can do with these heat maps and these sensors. And their hope is the winners of such competitions often go on to work for some of the NFL teams. So it's a dream for some of the people who are competing in this competition. And our last two here. So the US Navy has started using something called EO sensors. They're electro-optical sensors, which are similar to cameras, or they act like a camera actually, and they can provide 24/7 data. And it's different than radar because they're not having to constantly send out a signal, which could alert others of their location. So that's not really good in a hostile environment. But these sensors are passive sensors. They don't require us to send out, or them to send out signals. So they help them to see and let them know of approaching boats and whether they might be fishermen or pirates. And finally, this last example I thought was pretty neat. it talks about researchers who worked with Parkinson's patients, and they were using music-based therapy to treat gait problems. So the patients wore sensors on their shoes so that the researchers could then collect information on the patient's gait. And then they also made software. So they wrote code that would then analyze that data that they collected and determine which rhythms would be most beneficial to the individual patient. So then the patient had this system and they wore the system. So the sensors on their shoes and then the headsets as well. And they were to use this for 30 minutes, 5 times a week for 4 weeks. And what they found was their preliminary data so far is showing that it's having positive outcomes for the patient. It's helping to reduce their motor symptoms. So I thought that was pretty incredible that they can listen to certain music that that matches their gait and help them to reduce some of their motor symptoms that they're experiencing as a result of Parkinson's disease. I'm just going to check the chat. Oh, you've got all these articles on there. Thanks, Dean. Awesome. So now that we've talked about how sensors are used in the world around us, these are part of emerging technologies, which in Ontario is a significant or important expectation, a mandatory expectation in grades 1 to 8, as well as grade 9 science in the new grade 9 science curriculum. So that kind of opens our eyes as to how prevalent sensors are. And we can take a look at the microbit and program the microbit to do something similar to help students to kind of build their awareness and understanding of how sensors are working by actually coding them themselves. So the microbit, if you want to know more about the, why we use microbit in education, why I like it so much, you can watch a previous webinar that you'll see posted shortly on the website. But the microbit V2, which we'll be using this evening, and I'll show you the difference in a second, it does detect light levels, it detects temperature, it has sensors for accelerometer and magnetism as well, and sound. So we'll be making use of almost all of those sensors on this webinar. So you can see here, I've got an image of the 2 different microbits. So the V1 is the kind of the original, and there's been a few different variations of it since about 2014, 2015, when it was first given to all year 7s, equivalent of grade 7 here. In England. And then the V2 is more recent over the last couple of years, and you can see that, or the last year or so, and you can see that it has ridges. So on my picture here, the little ridges indicate that that's the V2. On the back as well, it does have a little V2 on the bottom right. There's a couple other differences too. But if you have a bunch of microbits in your classroom, you don't know which ones, just look for those ridges and then you know it's the V2. So the reason we need the V2 for this is there's a data logger extension that works with this one, and it only works with the V2 microbits. So if you have the V1 microbits, I do suggest still watching this webinar, because eventually you'll probably have those if you have the V1s at your school when you start to buy new ones, and just to know the potential of the V2. For those of you who have V1s and V2s and want something that works for everything, we'll be having another webinar next week. I believe it's February 28th at 7 p.m. And I'll be discussing how you can connect to a remote microbit, and you can collect data from that remote microbit in a similar way that we're doing tonight or today. But we are also actually able to see the data recording live. So we're collecting the data live, which I think is a huge benefit as well. So that's just for a whole different a different webinar, but useful for both the V1 and the V2. There you go. I did put that on the slide. So February 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern time, I'll be doing a webinar for both V1 and V2 looking at data collection. So I'll just show you where you can find the data logger extension once you're in MakeCode. So I'll click on here because I'm going to take you into microbit, or MakeCode rather, for microbit. So MakeCode for microbit, if I start a new project, I'll just call this data logger. And I'm just going to make my code a little bit bigger so you can see it there. these are the drawers here. And if you click on extensions, so I clicked on extensions in the drawers, and then you can see data logger is the first one. It's probably the most the most popular extension. If it's not there for some reason, you can just search at the top, data logger, all one word, and then the data logger extension will appear. You just click on that, and then you can see now in our menu, we have data logger as one of the drawers. If I click on that, you can then see all the different blocks associated with the data logger. What I'll be doing though, and what I've been doing with groups, is sharing a link to some code that I've already started that students can alter. And because I'm sharing the link, it keeps the extensions that I've included in that link. So when you open the link, it will automatically be there. So you probably don't have to do this step here with your students. So what we're going to be doing is taking a look at some environmental data first. So we'll be collecting data that includes temperature and light over time. We're going to store it on the microbit, and then we're going to view it afterward on our computer. So I'm going to be demonstrating this all from my computer. You're welcome to join along if you want, but I do suggest watching it and then maybe just trying it out afterwards. You can watch the recording, or you'll be able to take some pictures. I'll show you a slide that will be helpful for you, and then you can even just have me talking in the background if you want, and go ahead and follow the instructions on one of the slides. So for this, you'll need to use Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge, because we need to connect to the microbit with the pairing. So for those of you who have used the microbit before, you might have used it where you click and drag a file into a folder. You cannot use that for this. You need to actually pair the microbit, connect the microbit, and I will show you how I do that in a bit. But make sure you're using Google Chrome or Microsoft Edge for that. So I'm going to go over all the steps. I'm going to show you one step at a time on my slides, and then I'll proceed to do that live. When I do this with students, I do the same thing. I just show them one step at a time, and then I'll share the slide that I've been doing with teachers and with students, and then they just kind of follow along. They just follow that one slide as I run around helping. So today what I'm going to do, once again, is I'll go through all those steps, and then I will proceed to do it live. So, and I also just want to let you know that I will be sharing the links and the code screenshots from everything today on a document at the end. So you'll have access to all of that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do in a moment is, so step one, there are 5 steps to using the data logger and collecting data, and then getting something for you to look at. So I provide the students or participants in my workshop sessions with the link. And this is the code here, which I will talk about in a minute. So I give you the link. When you get to the link, you click on edit, and that will take you to MakeCode so that you can download the code onto your microbit and you can alter the code if you wish. So that's the first step. The second step is to make sure you've paired or connected the microbit and then downloaded that code onto the microbit. So just a reminder to do that. On the bottom of MakeCode, you'll click on the 3 dots and it'll say connect. You click to connect, and then there's a series of windows that you have to click next on and select. And I'll show you that. And then once you have it connected, you then click on the download on the bottom there, and it will download the code directly onto the microbit. So after you've connected the first time, you don't have to keep connecting again. All you have to do is click on download, and that code will be uploaded onto the microbit or downloaded onto the microbit. So let me just show you quickly. I usually have this video at the front. I walk everyone through, then I walk around and help everybody. So you can see I'm clicking on the 3 dots, clicking on connect device. I then click on next. Next again, and then that white window dialog box, you'll have to click on BBC microbit and then click on connect, and then you'll click on, I believe that was next, and then click on once it starts flashing. So you might have noticed that there was that little like microbit symbol kind of flashing. When it's done, you can then download the code onto your microbit. If it doesn't work right away, try just reloading the window at the top, just refreshing the page, and then going through that process again. Step 3 will be to unplug the microbit from the cord that's attached to your computer. I always like to use longer cords when I'm demonstrating in front of a group, because otherwise I'm like attached to my computer. So disconnect that cord, and then you'll be plugging in the battery pack into the microbit. So when you disconnect, as long as the program is on here, when you plug in your microbit, when you plug in the microbit, it will be, the program's on there, so it will run that program. It just needs to be powered up. It can only hold one program at a time. Step 4 is to place the microbit. So I'm going to do this all live in a moment. You'll place the microbit where you'd like to record the data. So maybe near a window, maybe you'll take it outside, or maybe the students will be going to different locations while they're recording the data. They'll press A, and then when they press A, they'll see that a check mark appears. So you might have saw that. I'll just, just rewind. I must be clicking something on my keyboard because it's going to the next slide. I've got a few things here when I was testing out everything. Okay, so let's run that again. You can see that when I click on the button A, the check mark will appear, and that means that it's recording data. And you'll also see a little red dot. It's a toggle feature that's flashing every 1 second, and it kind of is like a visual to indicate that it's collecting data. So I like to include that block, the toggle block, so that we know it's collecting data. When you press button B, the X will appear, and then you're done collecting data, and you can move on to step 5, our final step. So on step 5, you'll plug the microbit back into the computer. And then you'll go to wherever the files are stored on your computer and open up the microbit folder. So the microbit folder is sort of like a USB stick. If you've attached it to your computer, it will automatically create a microbit folder. You open that folder and you will see a new file called My Data that will automatically be put there when you plug your computer, or when you plug the microbit in to the computer. It will automatically appear. So then once you click on that My Data, it will open up an HTML file, and you will see something like what you see on my screen. Well, actually, it'll just be a couple columns of data, but then you can click on Visual Preview, see a little graph, and it's pretty amazing, I think, actually. And you'll see that in a moment. Okay. So that's the 5th step. So this here is the slide that I like to share whenever I do this activity with larger groups. So I go through all the steps just like I did there. Then I share this slide, and then I walk around and I help everyone. So you can see I don't share the link to the code until I've gone through all those steps with people, if it's their first time, because otherwise they'll go to the link and then it's hard to pay attention and people get frustrated. So I find going through all those steps, then sharing the link, and then they can read the steps. They're all listed. It will be more familiar to them that way. I find that works out really well. So I'm going to do all this live now, so you'll be able to see it. Okay. So I'm going to go to that link on the microbit and get started. I'll click on template Floyd. So that's my link, bit.ly/template Floyd. And I'm going to click on edit because I've got my screen now. So I'm going to click on edit. And there's my code. Let's take a quick look at this code. It looks complicated, but I'm going to walk you through it a little bit now. So we've got 2 columns of data that we're collecting. For the data logger to work, you need a minimum of 2 columns. So you have to do 2 columns for this to work. So we've got a temperature column and a light column. I've also got button A. So remember, when I press button A, the check mark will appear. You can see that in the simulator now. Button A means that the logging variable is set to true. If I press button B, it's set to false. So down here on the bottom left, you can see that every 1,000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, every 1 second, it's going to check if we're supposed to be logging. If we had pressed button A, then that logging will say true. So if this condition is true, if the logging variable is set to true, then go ahead and collect data. Then check again the next second. If this is true, then collect data. So it does that every second. So inside of there, so this is just like a loop. Every 1 second, if the logging variable is true, then we'll have the toggle the little LED will appear on our microbit, so we know it's collecting data. It's just like a visual for students. And then we're logging the data. So the temperature column will be, a temperature level rather, will be added to the temperature column. So this is an input. This is temperature. It's in degrees Celsius, and it will be added to the temperature column. Same with the light level. So the light level, it's a number between 0 and 255, will be added to the light column. And it does that every second until the logging variable is set to false. As soon as I press that B button, you can see the X appears. And then the next time it goes to check, the next second that it goes to check, if there's more data to collect, it will be set to false. So it doesn't do anything inside of that if conditional statement. It's done. It doesn't, there's no else there, so it doesn't do anything else. That's it. Over here, you can see that if you press button A and B at the same time, it will indicate that we're deleting the data log. I would suggest you can use it if you want, but I found it better to just reload everything and start again when you use the microbit data logger. If it's ever full, which I have yet to see this happen, and I tried to find information of how much data has to be in there for it to be full, and it just said it probably won't happen, but if it does, then just keep that in mind that it could fill up eventually. A good example of this that I remember reading about near the beginning of the pandemic was in England, where they were keeping track of people who tested positive for COVID, but then at some point they weren't able to keep track of that anymore. There was a glitch because they were taking that information and storing it in a spreadsheet. It was an older version of Microsoft Excel, and so it only held like a certain number of rows of data that was automatically put into that file. And so it just didn't work anymore. So they weren't able to collect data. It was like, and that was an older version, like I said, of Excel. So it was probably still like millions of data points. But that was an issue that they had. So that's just kind of a neat story to share with your students regarding this. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of those steps now. So the first thing I'm going to do is, well, pair my microbit. I think I'm already paired. I am not. So I'm going to connect my device and I click on next, and I'm looking, oh, that's why I'm not actually plugged in. So there we go. Troubleshooting 101 there. I'll just click on plug in my microbit, and I'll try that again. All right, so I'm on that white dialog box. I click on BBC microbit, and then I click on connect, and then done. So now I'm ready to download the program onto my microbit. You know that it's downloading because the back of the microbit will be flashing, the orange light will be flashing, and you can see I have the X on my microbit, so it's not currently downloading any data or logging any data, rather. So now that I have that program on my microbit, I can disconnect it from my computer. The light will go off because it's not powered, and then I'll plug in my battery pack. So you can see the X is there. It's ready for when I am. So I will then press button A when I'm ready to record data. So let's say maybe I'll go outside or I'll put it somewhere, but I'm going to press A. So you can see it's collecting data, and you also see the little LED flashing. That's because every second it's collecting a data point for us. Well, two, it's collecting temperature and it's collecting light. So maybe I will put this near a light, put it on different light sources near my window here. Maybe I can blow on it to make it a little bit hotter, to make the temperature increase. Maybe I would bring it outside because I'm not tethered to my computer anymore. I have this separate with my battery pack. So I've collected data for a couple, maybe 1 minute there. So I'm ready to stop collecting data. So I'm going to press B. There we go. So you can see the X has appeared. It's no longer collecting data. So my next step then, so step 5 then, right? You're going to disconnect it from the battery pack, connect it back into your computer. There we go. Okay. Now I'm going to go to my folder, my Microsoft Explorer, to look for the folder. And I'm going to look for my microbit folder, which is on the left-hand side usually. And you can see my microbit folder now has an extra file that wasn't there before called my data. Okay, I do see some questions, so I'll just take a look in a minute at the questions. So I'm going to click on my data. And then when I click on my data, you will see, boom, all of the data that I just collected, you can now see on my screen. So it started, the seconds actually starts when you download the program onto your computer. So when you import this into a spreadsheet, which I'll show you how you can do in a bit, you can either change the time to 0 if you want, but you can see that it's collecting data every second. So 15.8, 16.77, 17.77, 18.77. You can see my temperature data. You can see that I did manage to get the temperature to go a little bit higher when I blew on the microbit. And then you can see the light level because I had, it's pretty dark in where I'm sitting right now. And the light sensor goes by the ambient light level. So it's not like a true light sensor, but it does give you relative value. So you can see where I hooked it up or I held it near something very bright. Let's make it bigger for you. And then where I just held it away from a light source. So there is almost a minute of data. If I click on visual preview now, you can see this beautiful graph of both light and temperature. Again, this is an HTML file, so you can store this on your computer and then open it up anywhere else afterward. Now you'll notice that the temperature looks like it's just one flat line. It's because it's sharing the scale with the light level, and the light level varied a lot. So if I want to just turn off the light level temporarily, I can then see the temperature level. And you can see now it's 28, rose to 29, and then 30, and then dropped back down a little bit. So there you can see the scale is more precise, more particular. You can see it more closely there. Likewise, I can click on temperature and only show light. So there you can see the different variations of the light since I held it to different light sources. Okay, so there's the visual preview. And in a moment, I'm going to download some data. I'm just going to check if there's any questions that might help with everybody today. So I see a question. I think she just sent one just to me. So maybe that's why you're all wondering what questions. So maybe I'll read this question because it does look, I think this will help everyone if you don't mind, Jen. It says, could you explain why you need to set a minimum of 2 columns? So why doesn't one column, for example, work? So you would think that you could just do 1 column because, you could change the code to do that. I don't know. For some reason, the data logger extension, they've set it so that you have to have a minimum of 2. So if you're only requiring 1, just put sound or light or something else that you have for the microbit on there. And then a second question, which I think is useful, so I'm going to read it to everyone if that's okay. Also, why do you need to set columns temp and light after you delete the log when you set these columns in on start set of blocks? So that's a good question. When you delete it, because the on start only does that code when you plug your microbit in. So the second you plug your microbit in, it does that. Then if I press AB later, it will delete everything. And so that's why we have to insert the temperature and light columns again, unless we unplug and plug back our microbit in again, because on start only happens at the beginning. So those columns are set at the very beginning when you plug your microbit in. And then later on, if you delete everything, even those things will be deleted. And great question. The 0, she also asked about time 0, which she might have asked after I said it. So the time 0 is when you plug in your microbit and not when button A is pressed. I think you could actually explore. I'd have to spend some time doing that, making it so it starts when you press button A. I'd have to take a look at that to see if I could figure that out for you. All right, so I want to get back here again to show you a bit of magic. Well, I think it's pretty magical what we can do here. I'm going to download the data and show you what you can do with that data. I was checking my time here because okay, we're good. Lots of time. So I'm going to click on download and I'm going to open that up. Call this MakeCode. And I'm going to use Microsoft Excel. You can choose to use Google Sheets instead. So I'm opening this up in Excel. I'll show you that in a moment. Here we go. So this is the data that I collected. Once again, I'll make it a little bit bigger. So you can see that it has the timestamp every second. It also has the temperature column, and then it has the light column. I'm going to go ahead and make a scatter plot of this right now. So I'm going to highlight my three. Actually, I'm just going to do the temperature because I want the scale to be to work nicely. So I'm going to do the temperature against time here. So I'm going to go to insert. So I've highlighted the two columns I wish to create a chart for. I'm going to go to insert and I'm going to use a scatter plot. That's really important because you want the X, Y, X against Y here. So we're going to do the scatter plot. So you can see when I click on one of those choices, so I could use the data points if I want to, but I want to just use, I kind of like this one here. So there's my temperature and time graph. So I'm going to add axis titles. I'll change the title here to temperature in office during our midway through webinar. And then on the bottom, the x-axis here, I will indicate that this is the time in seconds. And then on the y-axis, I'm going to say light level. Now, light level, the units is just relative. They start at 0, go to 255. Oh, sorry, this is temperature. All right, so if I were to do the light level, now you know about the units for light level, but temperature is in degrees Celsius. So it does have units for that. So you can see the graph for that. You can make it bigger. You can compare values to other students in the class as well, compare different locations, and I'll show you how you might go about doing that in a bit. You can also do the same for columns A and C, and then insert a chart. Oh, can be combined. Okay, so I'd have to delete that other one, but I'm sure I could click off of it and do that. But I want to go back so that I can show you a few other tips and tricks related to this. All right. So now that we have the gone through how to use the data logger, you can then add a third column if you want to. So I suggest maybe adding a sound column. So if we go to that same program once again, and if I wanted to add sound column, so I go to edit because I want to edit the code. I suggest closing your other windows that contain any microbit information because you're connected. So it just kind of throws things off a little bit. Oops. I'll make it a little bigger so you can see. On start, we're going to label that third column. So I'm just going to hit the plus here. And I don't know if it remembers the last time I did this, so it automatically inserted sound, but you could change that to something else if you wanted to. Like, let's say you wanted to collect acceleration information, the acceleration strength, you can just type in that. And then down here, you would add the third column to indicate that you want to put the value in that column. So in the sound column, you would add the sound level. And then you can go about all of that once again, and you can collect data about the light, the temperature, and the sound in your data logger program. So returning back to my slide here. So what are some potential investigations related to the environmental data logger? So I'll share some investigations related to this, and then we'll move on to acceleration. I'm sure you can come up with some ideas, but these are some that I considered with my knowledge of the Ontario curriculum. I always have this little trusty sheet, which can be found on the curriculum context on the Ontario Education website. I'll hold it up so you know which sheet. I noticed I have lots of notes on there on the side, but looks like this. It just has every grade and every strand so that you know in which grade you're doing what in. So in grade 7, the students are learning about interactions in the environment, a perfect opportunity to collect information about abiotic factors in the ecosystem. So here's an idea. Maybe you have seed packages, and we are going to determine where we are going to plant seeds, where we're going to put the seeds in our classroom to make sure that they get full sun, because on the seed package, it says that the seeds require full sun. So what you could do then is have groups of students. So one group of students could make it so their microbit gets the information, the light data from the science closet. A second group of students might get information from the front of the science classroom. And the third group of students, make this bigger so you can see, might get the data from the back of the science classroom. Then what they could do is they could paste all of their data into one Excel sheet. So group 1, put theirs in column B, group 2, put theirs in column C, and group 3 in column D. And the time stamped would be the same because they all agreed to collect information with the same timestamp, so the same interval when they were collecting information. That's really important. Then you could graph it. So I just highlighted columns A, B, C, and D, and it automatically, when I made a scatter plot, it plotted the light levels against the time. So you can see the time here for the science closet on the bottom, because it's not as bright in the science closet. And this is a simple example just to demonstrate for you. The front of the classroom was a little bit brighter, but obviously the back of the classroom is near the window. And so we can see the light levels near the window. You could do this in the playground, leave the microbits for a couple of hours outside all day if you want to. Might want to alert people in the school about that if they see some, things like this around the schoolyard. They would want to know. But you could do this for any location in your school as well. You could do this for temperature, for sound, where are the loudest areas in the school, and then make a graph like this as well. So I think that would be I really like when students collect information and share it together for them to explore an investigation or run an investigation. In strand A, by the way, so we are supposed to do coding. We are supposed to look at emerging technologies. And we're also in Ontario supposed to use the the scientific investigation process. They should be doing labs. Okay. A second idea, which I've done a couple of times now, this is with my pre-service education group at the Faculty of Education at Western University. So here are some connections to strands E in grade 7, heat and the environment, strand D, systems in action in grade 8. Pretty much anything you do will work for systems in action in grade 8. So that's the perfect strand to connect to when you're doing coding in grade 8. This also would work well for grade 9. We are looking at climate change in strand B. Also in strand D, we're supposed to look at environmental impacts of energy production and consumption. And then in strand E, space exploration also considers technologies that contribute to our understanding of climate action. What we did is, so something else to keep in mind is maybe we want to consider which materials to use on a rooftop. If you use, and you can actually use different materials for your solar panels for your rooftop as well. So when you're doing this, you'll find that, well, and actually if the students research it, because they should research a little bit first, there are certain materials that provide insulation. So in the summertime, you can actually reduce the temperature just by having certain materials on your roof, a significant amount, reducing the need to turn on your air conditioning. Same within the wintertime, you can have the insulation that will keep your house warmer so you don't have to turn up the heat as much. So you're reducing our energy consumption. So what we did was we had the microbit underneath an incandescent light bulb, and it actually got to temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius, which I was a little bit worried about the microbits, but the microbits are okay. And then what we did is we compared this. We had other groups as well, put material on top of the microbit and recorded the temperature over time. If you use tinfoil or like this, you can see this little like baking tinfoil pan, it significantly reduced the temperature that the microbit was showing in our data. So like a shiny object was reflecting the light, and it made a huge difference. So you could have all different materials, and then they can collect the data, put it into a spreadsheet together, and then make a graph, just like what you saw with the light levels, comparing the temperature using different materials covering up the microbit. So I think that would be a really cool investigation.
Lisa, there's a question from Jennifer. What's the minimum and maximum temperature that can be logged on the microbit?
So I don't know. I'm not sure if it's actually, if you can find that online. I haven't came across it myself. So I was surprised when I saw the data in my students on my student's computer that was over 100 degrees. I was a little bit worried that maybe our microbits might break, but they were okay. So yeah, you'll have to try it out and see what you can get. Maybe we could ship it over to Stacy in Terrace Bay, way up north, and we can test it out, see how cold we can get it, how low of a negative number we can go into. So another idea would be to have students test out different materials to keep warm. So maybe different, you can wrap materials around their hands, sort of like mittens, hold the microbit, and then stand outside or hang out outside for, an hour, and then check which materials keep their hands the warmest, the longest, according to the data. And then again, you can make a graph comparing each material. So that would be great for grade 7 heat in the environment, looking at capacity of heat. I also think this would be useful for grade 5 human health and body systems. Our body systems don't tend to perform as well under suboptimal conditions. So we can consider, how do we keep ourselves from getting too cold or too hot? And then in grade 6, there's a big section on protecting astronauts. So in the space unit, Space Strand, there's a big section considering how do we protect our astronauts. So what materials are you going to send them outside the International Space Station as they're fixing things outside of there? Okay. Another idea would be to maybe look at the engineering design process, and they can use this to determine what kind of temperatures they're getting. They can then control a fan, so create an automated cooling system. These fans are like only $2 or $3 that you can attach to a microbit, but you don't actually need the fan. It's a prototype, so they can just like turn on a light on the LED or on the LED display on the microbit, indicating when the fan might turn on. All right, so we'll take a look at what you might do with accelerometer data. And then I'll show you a couple more curriculum connections, and then we'll wrap up for this webinar. So I do have another link for you, bit.ly/Floyd Excel, and I'll share this link with you on the end with the document, so you'll have access to that. And Dean has shared it as well for us. So you can see in our code, we're collecting data about the X, Y, and Z axis of the microbit, as well as the overall strength of the acceleration. So for example, if I move my microbit up quickly, so it does the acceleration. So the change in speed for acceleration. So if I raise this quickly on the Z axis, then you'll see the Z data adjusting. Same with Y and X as well. So you'll have to have the students figure out which is Y, X, and Z on the microbit. So facing up, just for your knowledge, would be if you have your microbit like this and I moved upwards. So let's say I put it on the top of a rocket or something that I'm testing out with my students. That would be the Z axis. And then side to side, and then would be the X, and then this direction, I don't know if you can see, would be Y, but you can test that out. Now for acceleration, notice that I'm collecting this data every 100 milliseconds. That's important because for acceleration, it takes into account the time. So the change in speed over time for acceleration, that's what acceleration is, change in speed over time. So you have to make sure that you're taking the data like a smaller value. You have to do a smaller period of time. Every 1 second, you won't get accurate data. So you have to make sure that's a smaller value. And you can see that I have 4 columns here, the X, Y, Z, and the overall strength as well. Okay. So what can you do with that information? Well, as I said, you can have your students try to figure out so they can move along the y-axis, X and Z, or what they think is each of those, and then look at their data. And then, and because they recorded, how long they moved the microbit on each axis, they could then figure out which is X, which is the Y, and which is the Z by looking at their data after. What they can also do is run from rest with the microbit. Maybe you get your top 3 sprinters in the class and see who can accelerate the fastest. Maybe they can walk from rest. They can throw the microbit carefully. And then they can indicate on their graph once they upload that, or once they open up the data, the visual preview, at what point on the graph each of those things happened. So they're learning, they're using this more of modeling to understand a concept, the concept of acceleration. I was thinking, by the way, for this, if you do this, this is great for grade 5, human health and body systems. Grade 8, systems in action, is always one that you can do. Grade 7, we do have to look at structures. So we can consider the potential of using an accelerometer as an earthquake detector. You can also consider in grade 8, again, systems in action works for everything. Consider what materials will reduce the impact of vibrations from industrial machines. So when we use industrial machines, they're quite powerful, and they make things around them vibrate. So maybe students can consider what machines might protect, or what materials might protect the machines from causing vibrations around. There's really unlimited potential of what you can do here. So wrapping up now, and then I'll have a couple minutes for you to do a survey. So in grade 7 and 8, I shared this exact thing for grades 4, 5, and 6 on our webinar for microbit sensors for beginners, if you want to check that out. But in grades 1 to 8, the top 2 these expectations are from grades 1 to 8. And then these are the more specific to grade 7 and 8, that continuum of skills that we see from grades 1 to 8. In A2.1, they're supposed to use coding in investigations and to model concepts. So you saw many ways that they could collect data and use it for the purpose of investigations. For the modeling concepts, I think with that acceleration, trying to understand how acceleration works through looking at acceleration data would be useful. We're also supposed to consider the impacts of emerging technology. In grade 8, we're supposed to include artificial intelligence. So they can look at how industries are using data, and including AI sometimes, to analyze that data and then make decisions about the data. Now that you can see that you can collect so much data over a large period of time, maybe they can consider big data, where it's not just that amount of data that you saw on my screen. It would be so much data that it wouldn't even fit on my computer. We would have to store it somewhere else. So huge amounts of data. It really gives us a whole new perspective on how the world around us is working. In grade 7, we're supposed to focus on, when we're assessing, I realize that maybe this will be over the next couple of years once you get more comfortable with the new curriculum, but we're supposed to focus on planning and designing programs. So perhaps once we give them a link and they test out one program for maybe the environmental data logger, then they can adjust it, alter it, plan out to collect other information, other data. In grade 8, automating large systems in action. It gives you a big hint there, which strand you should be connecting to. I don't think it's necessary to connect to every strand when you're doing coding. That would be a lot. It would be less authentic, I think, as well. But in grade 8, focusing on automating large systems in action, automation is the key. So anytime you can automate the collection of data and then make a decision based on that information through coding without human intervention, that's automation. And of course, you're supposed to connect with other strands, which we talked about. In grade 9, once again, it's very similar, using coding in investigations to model concepts and relationships. So we saw how you can do that related to climate action, as well as taking information about the environment. And then they're also supposed to consider building awareness of emerging technologies across all the strands in science, in grade 9 science. I'm just sharing this because it seems to be popular. People seem interested in having this. So this is a comparison of the grade 7-8 mathematics expectations in Ontario versus the grade 7-8 science and technology expectations here in Ontario. I will mention something I didn't talk about, but I'm sure those of you who teach in Ontario who have been teaching grade 8 would have thought, oh my goodness, this would be perfect for data analysis in grade 8. That is the big emphasis in grade 8 for coding in mathematics. And that entire webinar incorporated data. So that would be perfect for your grade 8 mathematics students to collect data. And then you can teach it cross-curricularly, which is also one of the expectations in Strand A in science and technology, is to incorporate cross-curricular learning as much as possible. So you can do math and science together when you're doing coding. So there's the link to all of the resources from today. You'll see I believe I made it so viewable, so you should be able to access that document. There's the environmental data logger, the link, screen print of the code, acceleration data logger, link and screen print of the code. And then at the bottom, I also have that slide that I think you'll find useful that you might share, like the 5 steps to using the data logger. So we have 4 minutes left for you to complete the survey. So there's a link for the sessions that I'm doing. If you can please complete that survey. The survey is very helpful in not only providing feedback for me as the presenter to those who are giving us the opportunity to present this webinar, so Dell Technologies, OACM, and ALP, and also to vouch for why we should do webinars like this to support educators. So it's really appreciate you completing that survey. And then finally, I hope to see you again on other webinars. There are a number of other topics as well. I've got 3 more coding webinars that I'll be doing. One, as I mentioned, is the microbit data for V1 and V2. So we'll look at how you can collect data from a remote microbit. So we'll connect microbits. They'll be talking to one another, sort of collecting data from a microbit that is somewhere else. And then another one is looking at emerging technologies, what you can do for that particular strand A expectation, how you can connect to other strands through that. And then I've got another one for Scratch coding in mathematics. So thank you again for joining. I'll stay on here in case there are a couple questions. And I hope everyone has a safe evening. And I know some of you might be hoping for a snow day tomorrow. I know my kids were. Great to see you on there, Danielle. Thank you for joining. No problem. You can watch the rest later, as you said. Thanks, Katina, for pointing out that tomorrow we have a Truth and Reconciliation session, a webinar that you can still register for. Great to see you again, Tara. Thanks, Lise. And Christian, I have to get your name correct.
It's Christian.
Christian.
Okay. Have a great evening. Bye-bye. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining, Patty. Awesome. Be great to see you. Hi, Yolanta. Great to see you again today. And Jennifer. Stacy. Nice to see you. Hopefully you avoid this ice storm or some sort of storm up north.
Well, we've got snow coming down and ice